Hello and welcome to GM Tips. GM Rick here. So here's a couple things I'm going to discuss today. And there's Minnie GM, as you can hear her in the background, and Barbie. Yeah, you hear those things as things go on with my GM Tips. Minnie GM loves to come through. So what I want to discuss with you is the topic of developing a adventure path or adventure campaign for your fantasy RPG with either a pirate theme or a water theme. Now, we've talked a little bit about that before, and I've kind of glossed over a little bit of the things, but I think really looking at how to develop and design one, because they're not as simple, I think, sometimes as we like them to be, or sometimes we oversimplify them in wanting to recreate Pirates of the Caribbean or some of the other ocean adventures like Master and Commander. Great reference materials, by the way, for those type of games. There's a lot to consider when you consider that. Now, a waterborne campaign, the things you've got to consider is what region of the world do you want to put your characters in? And there may be some established things, like, for instance, if you're using Faerun, if you're using Greyhawk, if you're using Eberron, if you're using Inner Sea, Pathfinder, if you're using other similar campaign settings to that, they may already have some areas of the world or locales where piracy or waterborne campaigns really make sense. Now, you can do several different things. Now, one of the themes we didn't discuss is you don't have to have an ocean-based pirate campaign or water campaign. You can do a river campaign. You can, especially on large rivers or long rivers, so their version of the Mississippi River or the Yangtze River or all the rivers that are in Egypt that are big rivers. You can do things like that and set it in those type of settings. So keep in mind, you don't have to necessarily make it saltwater. You can use a freshwater campaign. You can do a large inner sea or a large inner lake. So perfect example off of Pathfinder out of the Inner Sea campaign. There's Lake Encarthian. And Lake Encarthian is up in the north of Aveston, and it has a lot of area. And so you can really conduct a water campaign and do a lot there without everything having to be based there and in just a large ocean area. The first things you got to do is you got to decide on what area of the world you want to do and whether it's going to be saltwater, freshwater, river, lakes, how you want to tie things in. And do you want it to be piracy, or do you want it to be like a ship with a merchant ship taking things up and down the rivers, or an exploratory ship that's going into the deep river areas that's trying to explore areas of the world that are less explored? There's a lot of different ways you can take a water campaign. So when you design that, take in mind that where do you want to place your characters that would be of interest to them? And then the second thing is suggesting to them professions or classes that will allow for them to do well on the water. Now, it doesn't all have to stay on the water, but you may want a good portion of it to be on water. And so in order to do that, you want some professions like profession sailor, profession navigator, skill sets with knowledge geography or knowledge cartography. There are different things that your classes are really going to want to have skill set wise or class wise. So you may want to look at swashbucklers. You may look at archetypes that have to do with waterborne campaigns. Maybe you do a picaroon, or you do a musketeer type of gunslinger. So there's different elements with it that really lend and enhance that experience. It can be a bunch of rogues that are like river rats. They have a river rat archetype. So there's a lot of different things you can do in elements and suggesting to the players on what kind of classes they want to look at or maybe focus on a little bit. A burglar on board of a ship, yeah, that's kind of an okay build, but it doesn't lend to what they're trying to do. So keep in mind as you're doing that, you want to help your players as a GM. You're not trying to railroad them. At the end of the day, they can choose whatever they want to choose. but you do want to help them to understand beneficial classes, beneficial archetypes. So it's up to you as a GM to get to know that a little bit. And then look at the theme of your story. What kind of theme do you want? What is the overall theme? Is it just going from place to place and exploring place to place and just learning more? Is it about building up a reputation as a privateer? Maybe you're freeing slaves, so you could be part of Andoran and the freedom, or another part of another world on Faerun that doesn't believe in slavery, that believes in abolishing slavery, so you are a pirate that is geared at that. You could be a pirate that's geared at, just brutally taking ships and force-pressing crews. You could be a pirate that is out to fight other piracy and deal with that. So a Corsair type. You could be a pirate that is after maybe certain lost treasure or a hidden value or item. Maybe you want to sit on the pirate council. So you want to have something to do with the pirate council. So like in Inner Sea Golarion, they have the free captaincy. So maybe you want to be a free captain, but also a free captain lord that sits on the council. So you want to be a lord of the pirates, or lordess. So keep in mind, there's different themes you want to do, and you really kind of want to give a fleshing out of that for it. Again, a lot of people like to go into it free form and just say, I'm going to play it out the seat of my rear end. It doesn't go as well as you think it does. I love to really flesh things out and give the players a kind of a path to take, depending on what they decide they want their characters or their water campaign to be about. It then lends me to look at what adventure modules would make sense, what adventure paths, are there things I can customize, are there things that I can turn around and work with. So again, getting that all fleshed out in the beginning helps out a lot, depending on what setting you want to put them in. So for instance, if you put them into Midgard, you may want to look at some other elements there of what's going on in the Western Seas and the piracy out there. Why is there piracy? What leads it to? Are they sellswords? Are they ships for hire? Is there a reason why they're pirates? Do they have certain nations they hate? So you can really build a story depending on knowing your area pretty well. Same way with a homebrew campaign. You've got to look at what elements are involved and what drove people to piracy, or to be merchants, or to be explorers, or to be privateers, or to even be Navy. You could be a Navy hunting pirates. So you could be pirate hunters. So that's what Master and Commander is. Going after the pirates, trying to take down the enemy, following them to the ends of the earth to take them down. So you can do different types of things along those lines. Now, knowing what kind of ships will be able to sail the waterways. So on a river, you're not going to have a galleon, unless it's a deep river, going through a river. It just doesn't make sense. You're not going to have that. You're going to have skiffs. You're going to have small junks. You're going to have some more shallower bottom boats that are going through. So really, you aren't going to have a pirate ship like you would on a lake. And even lake ships are different than ocean-going ships, because lake ships don't have to be have as many masts or be as sturdy of a construction as some of the other areas if you're on an open ocean. Do you have biremes, triremes? What types of ships make sense in those waterways for that? And then what kind of water encounters will they come up against? So you got to build some tables with your monsters. Know what type of challenges they're going to run into up and down the lakes as they encounter things. And really kind of set up a framework that allows you to really get things scaled in and ready to go. So there's a lot of different things you can do there. Now, another thing that I look at with a pirate campaign in a setting or a water campaign setting, what races do you want to allow? And that really comes into play, because you can allow a couple races that you would not be able to easily allow on land-based campaigns. So Undines. Undines are a perfect example of a water race. That is a water genie kind of race that you can allow in your campaign. You can allow aquatic elves, maybe merfolk. Again, there's a lot of different other races that you can do. Part elementals. Maybe a wereshark. or Were Rat. There's some other things that you can give some twists in. So Werekin or Skinwalkers. There's definitely some different things you can do on the water that you couldn't do otherwise. And maybe there's some classes that are harder to allow. Like, how would a Dhampir deal over running water? Well, it depends on how you play your vampires. And does running water kill the vampires, or can they not cross running water? So you've got to look at some of those classes and say, yeah, this makes sense, this doesn't. Great races for water are Tengu or Kenku, Ratfolk, Merfolk, Undines, half aquatic elves or full aquatic elves, half part Merfolk or full Merfolk, your air genies, so your Ganase or your air Ganase or your I'm trying to think about which ones they are. Air, so sylphs, yeah, sylphs. So there's different ones that make sense that wouldn't otherwise make sense for water campaigns. Now, your base core classes, you can always, or races, you can always have those and work with those. So it's not a real problem. And in encountering things, you look at different races. So, like, where would they run into Shahagan? Where would they run into Scum? Lokatha? What other types of races will they run into out in these waters? Do you want them to go underwater? That's always a fun thing. So you got to kind of prep them a little bit there. Are there underwater cities that they can come into? So on your map, you may want to note underwater cities or sunken ships. I always love doing that. Putting the sunken ships, because there's always a lot of sunken ships. Storms come through, piracy, battles. Maybe somebody was drunk while they were sailing the ship and they ran it aground and they sank the ship. So there's a lot of things you can do there. And then what took up residence inside of it. So you can build some really interesting and unique encounters from that. I love setting campaigns from me into the islands. Now, I know some people love the lakes and love the rivers, and I think that's a beautiful thing too, and I've done both, and both can be fun campaigns. I love islands because there's so much to explore. Even if you're from those islands, you don't know every one of those islands. There are so many of them in an archipelago that you may not know every single one. And maybe there are, even sailing as a navy, maybe there's natural disasters. So, like in the Inner-Sea campaign, there's the Eye of Abendigo. You got to sail around the Eye of Abendigo to get to places. And then the pirates are near the Eye of Abendigo. So if you're sailing from, say Rahadum down to Sergava, it's not an easy route. It really isn't. There's a lot of dangers, a lot of islands. There's a lot of storms. There's the permanent hurricane that's going on there. You can either fly through the sodden lands and go towards the coast, or you can go out farther around the eye and then brave the idea that you could run into the pirates, and there's no land to come settle into if you're attacked. What type of implements are you going to have on your ships? Are you going to have ballista? Are you going to have cannons? Are you going to give them black powder weapons? Are you going to give them catapults with swivels on them that allow you to defend your ship? What's the accuracy? Do people have ability to use this? Do your characters have like a knowledge engineering that will allow them to be able to use the siege engines that are put on ships to protect ships? So there's a lot of factors that you got to factor into these kind of things for water campaigns that I know I didn't go through in the last one. That's why it's kind of a part 2. Also, what kind of rewards are there? Is there infamy or fame? That's a great place to begin introducing the concepts of infamy and fame. So how does that work? Well, infamy and fame are points you gain from telling tales in a port of your deeds on the water. Maybe somebody else tells your deeds, was with you with the crew, or they see you do something amazing. So for good kind of people that are good sailors, fame is important. That fame, what does it do for you? It gives you better rolls, gives you discounts off of getting items. It helps you with maybe influence inside an area or a city or a port of call. So you kind of build a reputation down there. Infamy is the opposite. That's when you're doing things like Captain Jack Sparrow. If you're out there and doing so, or any of the other ones that you want to say out there. So pick any of the pirates. I mean, Will or my buddy, who's the other captain that's always going against Sparrow. That was in the first one as an undead captain. God, I'm just blanking on him. And I can see him as clear as day, and I can see the actor. And I'm just, yeah, it's one of those mornings. But you can be any of those type of characters, and you build that reputation. And that reputation holds sway. Maybe you can intimidate somebody a little more. Maybe you can press people into your crew a little more. Maybe you can get a little better discount or more knowledge or some better local intel from having that. And how's it spent? Pathfinder uses a system called prestige points. So your PP are your, for infamy or for otherwise, what you can spend that isn't material, but it's what you spend to give you better rolls. And you can always regain that. Your infamy and fame stays constant, but your spending value of it, your liquid value of it, comes from your prestige points. And you can design that. And you can design what your prestige points will be for those players in your area. So it just gives you some variety on what they can earn that isn't always material treasure, and allows them to kind of buccaneer it up a little more. Or, if they're infamous of freeing slaves, their infamy with their local slaver nations is horrific. But with the free nations, they're famous. And so their fame gets them a little more help. Maybe it gets them out of trouble when the slaver nations are chasing them down. So there's some different things you can build in there and really make it interesting for the characters. Take them through what a common day is on a ship. What I don't let players do is I don't let them start the ship as the captain, the navigator, the lieutenant, the second in command. They start out as cabin boys and girls, or they start out as swabs. And they either swab or they climb, and they learn the ropes. And you allow them to be involved with that. And so they got to build up their skill sets and their skill points. So climb skills are very important. Acrobatic skills are very important. The sailor profession is very important. Other types of skill sets that lend to that, so bluffing and diplomacy, to get in and out of work or to lessen duties, all come into play. So you get to learn the ropes of a ship, learn the discipline of a ship, learn what happens when you don't do what you're told. And so that way, they're not going to wear heavy armor. Let's face it, on a big ship, you're not going to be wearing a full set of chainmail, or splint mail, or banded mail, or half plate, or a breastplate. Why? Because if you go overboard, you got to use your swim skill, and that goes against it. And you have a good chance of sinking or getting fatigued much easier. And then it's also lends to diseases and being out in the sun and sunburn. You are not going to wear heavy armor. Leather armor, hide armor, cloth armor. You want something that breathes, that allows you to climb and clamber and get places. In fact, a lot of times your armor may be stowed. So when an emergency situation comes up, guess what? Your players only have their dexterity and their feats to protect them. And that's fun. And it really is. You can take it around because, again, you're not trying to kill them off. But you're trying to show them that, look, it's different being on a ship. It is not going to be you're this armored hulking tank walking around all the time. It's not comfortable. So keep that in mind. Play weather. Do your weather checks. Do your, one day it's calm. The next day it's stormy. The next day high winds. One day no winds. So you may be rowing one day. You may be climbing and putting, working the rigging one day. You may be swabbing the decks another day. You may be repairing damage after things with craftsman skills. So again, it gives you kind of a flavor for a ship's life. Play that up. Make it a fun experience for your players. Make sure it's memorable. I hate this, let's just skip by being on a ship and get to the destination. That takes the whole fun out of a water campaign. I made sure our players, when we played the Adventure Path, Skull and Shackles, I made sure they got a full-on experience of what it is. And they kept that experience, and we kept it up throughout the whole adventure. So they didn't just magically morphingly get from A to B. They had to work as sailors and as pirates to get that going. Really play that up with them. And going into port. So, for instance, if you're a pirate and you land in a legitimate port, You don't want to be flying your colors. You don't want to be bragging you're a pirate. And in fact, you want to keep as low a profile as possible. You know your players. They're not going to want to do that. They're going to want to boast and talk about it. So you can have whole chase scenes where the local law enforcement chases them down. And I love these because Pathfinder does this with chase cards. So you can lay them down as an obstacle. So, and if then, okay, you got to go over this obstacle to get to this obstacle, to get to this one, to get to this one. And what you're trying to do is stay ahead of the people behind you. So they're rolling and you're rolling. And it's just literally an all-out free-for-all. Will they catch you? Will you not? Will you slip off a roof? Will they slip off the roof? How is it going to work? It's almost like you remember seeing the Assassin's Creed movie where they're chasing on the top, where he's reliving it, or the game where you're running and jumping and climbing and swinging and doing all these things. Utilize that with your players. Even if you're doing D&D 5, you're doing Dungeon Age, you're doing a Dungeon World, or you're doing 13th Age, or you're doing Numenera, you're doing whatever system. So, Cypher System, if you're doing Cypher System, if you're doing Savage Worlds, take it through this sequence. I'm telling you, the most fun is when you set up those skill set sessions where people are trying to use their skills to get through things. And they're just like running, jumping, screaming, you know, oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to get caught. Oh no, Bob's going to get caught. Mary's going to get caught. We got to help him. And you're running and you're going and you're doing this and you get experience for it. And it's fun. And it's something other than combat. And it's just a great part of being on something like that, that type of setting and campaign. You can use it for non-water campaigns, but it's just great fun in a port that breaks the monotony. So when you're designing your challenges around this, take into account all these things. Build your arsenal ahead of time so that your players, when they jump into this scenario with you, are so fired up that they want to do another. They really do. They want to add on. They want to do a part 2 of the campaign, or a part 3, or a part 4, or part 5, where they have another set of young characters coming through, following in the footsteps. Do those type of memorable campaigns for your players. I think that's it. About 23 minutes on this GM Tips, but I wanted to kind of add on to a part 2 of water campaigns and pirate campaigns, so that way you would have a little more flavor and a little more idea of what goes involved. Watch this with my other one, and that way then you have the flavors of both GM Tips, and I think it'll really help you in designing this type of setting. Thanks again. Appreciate your comments. Rick M. the GM at Twitter, without a K. And then RICMOH45 at Gmail if you want to email me about anything, or you can leave me a comment up on YouTube. Thanks again.